Okay, ready?
Yeah.
Start? Okay. Hello, veterinary friends. Welcome to the Veterinary Life Coach Podcast. I have a lovely guest for you today. It's Dr. Sean McPeck, and he is the owner of Tier 1 Veterinary Medical Center in Palmer, Alaska. He's a 210 graduate of Colorado State College of Veterinary Medicine and Biomedical Sciences. He is a former Army Ranger who developed his leadership skills as a sniper team leader and veterinarian with the U.S. Army Special Operations 75th Ranger Regiment. Welcome to the podcast, Sean. I'm really, really happy to have you.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate the introduction. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, I love it. So if you would, I always like to hear where veterinarians got started and their veterinary story. So can you start wherever you want to start and tell me your veterinary story?
Sure. Yeah. No, I appreciate that. It's really kind of a mixed career because it involves both the military and also being on the civilian side and trying to get going and get accepted into veterinary school. So starting out, I enlisted in the military right out of high school. Always wanted to be a veterinarian growing up around animals. My dad was a horse trainer, but I wanted to do in the military, wanted to serve, but also to help with school, and immediately went through Ranger selection and made it into the special operations, the 75th Ranger Regiment, became a sniper team leader, made it up to the rank of sergeant. And this was pre 9/11, right? So there wasn't a lot going on. And I realized that, hey, I wanted to make a move on my career as a veterinarian, realizing that I needed to get to school. So got out of active duty, but stayed in the National Guard. I stayed with it. And at that time, I knew I needed to do something to make my application stand out in competing for those seats in veterinary school. So I spent some time in Madagascar doing a study abroad, lived there for 6 months, and actually started darting primates for researchers using my skill set.
Because you were a sniper.
100% correct. And
awesome.
These researchers are coming back from the field and complaining about how they had, missed and what weren't able to capture. And I offered to help assist with the darting. And the next thing you know, I'm getting invited and hired by the Duke University Primate Center, Johns Hopkins University, to go down to Costa Rica and dart and live capture howler monkeys and spider monkeys. And so that's where I got my start and really thought that wildlife veterinary medicine was going to be my calling. As I did get accepted into veterinary school following my graduation, I also was commissioned as a infantry officer in the National Guard. And basically was told that if I did not get into veterinary school, that I was going to be deployed active duty to Iraq. And luckily, I got accepted my first try. So they gave me a educational delay, a deferment. And as I'm going through veterinary school, all of a sudden I get approached by active duty. And they said, hey, if you come back active duty as a veterinarian, we'll help out with some of these college debt that you have. And being from Alaska, being non-sponsored, non-scholarship, out of state, tuition's pretty expensive.
Yeah.
And so it was a great deal for me because I loved the military, loved the culture, the institution of a performance-based institution where if you work hard and you are good at what you do, then that is recognized and rewarded. And so I'll use that as something that I applied as part of I believe the success of my hospital was creating a culture of a performance-based institution. And so, yeah, went back active duty and immediately spent a year in Afghanistan taking care of the Marines IDD program, which was the improvised explosive detector dogs, where they used Labradors to find these IEDs. And those dogs were so good that they started being targeted a lot and kept the veterinarians very busy, me being one of them. But after that year, in the Helmand province and taking care of the dogs and that dog program, I realized I wanted to get back to the special operations community. So I went back through Ranger selection again 13 years later, and this time as a veterinarian and a commissioned officer, and made it through selection, and was right back in the special operations community now as a veterinary surgeon leading up the veterinary department at the 75th Ranger Regiment. And obviously they had a working dog program. And also as a veterinarian, I did a lot of the training for the human medics. So that's my quick kind of synopsis of where my career path went, and spent another 3 deployments going to Afghanistan as a veterinarian for the Ranger Regiment. And at 19 years of serving, realized I wanted to get out and see how the civilian life would be as a veterinarian, and worked for almost 2 years for corporate, and realized that, hey, I think I can do something better. Seeing the culture in the corporate side of the veterinary world was something where I realized, and speaking and hearing the complaints from the techs and the doctors, that there was an opportunity. It was a privately owned practice where I could do better and maybe make the retention of staff and those talented doctors and veterinary technicians a core component of my mission in creating a practice. And so I found that, you know, it's very difficult, but if you constantly look at the culture and weeding out the toxic individuals and really focusing on retaining your talented and the good apples, the ones that are coming there every day with a good attitude, because it spreads. It's not just the doctors that are setting the tone, right? I mean, that technician that comes in, right? Exactly. You know, and so emphasizing that constantly, that, hey, this is something where we all have an impact on the culture that we come here to work in and be in this environment. And so I spent a lot of time really focusing on positive reinforcement, creating a performance-based culture where those people that were wanting to do more, those technicians that wanted to learn how to run a blood bank program, those technicians that wanted to learn how to run a CT, do an MRI, that those were recognized and rewarded. And the same thing with the doctors too, not just always doing the negative stuff, focusing on counseling people, that not, you know, taking time to do the positive reinforcement too. And so really working on the culture, I think, is important for success, because if we constantly ignore problems and we're afraid to face an issue, it's going to fester, and the people are going to see that, right? There's going to be animosity if somebody gets, you know, this do as I say, don't do as I do type leadership that
doesn't work.
No, it does not work. And because people see that, you got to lead from the front. There can't be anything beneath you. I'm going to clean a toilet. I'm going to use that mop. Because I'm going to be asking somebody else to do that. So I'm not going to sit here and say that that's beneath me, but I want you to do it. Right. And so showing that you're willing to do something that you're also going to be asking somebody to do is very important, and setting that example. Right.
So what do you think the disconnect with all of these corporations is? Because, you know, since I've been in vet med, I've been in it a long time. It's changed from privately owned practices almost exclusively now to almost all corporations. Because you worked for a corporation and you know what that's like, what do you think they're getting wrong? What do you think they need to do differently for us?
Well, there's a couple of things, right? So I think a lot of the clients feel that there's a detachment from a corporate entity, because I don't think that their issues or whether it's complaints or concerns are addressed directly, and taking the time to address things is very important. And that's capturing your social media, right? When you get these false narratives that people posting, a lot of times it's a very snippet of a truth, and then an elaboration to become a victim and to get this social media attention. So capturing that right away and addressing it and putting out the truth is very important. But also reinvesting in the hospital. That was the big thing that I saw when working for it, is that there was a failure of the corporate side to reinvest in whether it's the equipment or the people. They're more worried about that, getting as much profit out of it as quickly as possible without, I mean, I can't tell you how many times we begged to just get a fluid pump. And of course, technicians are dying to get nice equipment because they want to practice the best medicine possible.
Right.
And if they're sitting there feeling like they can't even get basic equipment, you know, a bear hugger to keep a patient warm, for example. And so I've taken it as a goal of mine to constantly reinvest and have the best equipment possible, so that not only my doctors can practice the best medicine and offer that to the clients, but also your technicians feel like they are supported to be able to do that patient care and feel like they're practicing that high quality medicine that everybody got into the field to want to do. And so as veterinarians, I feel like a lot of times we're trying to create and scramble to get things when because the corporate entities are unwilling to reinvest into that hospital. And so you know, and it's not just the equipment, it's the people too, right? I talked about that. And so I spend a lot of time doing team building. I've hired a communications professor from the local university, I don't know how, multiple times, to come out and role play with actors so that our client service representatives and our technicians know how to deal with different, whether it's a difficult client, whether it's an upset client, these type of things that many times they're not prepared to deal with. All of a sudden you have a client yelling at you. How do you deal with that and deal with it in a way to where you don't have people leaving because they don't feel like they're supported, right? The client is not always right. As much as
that was the old adage, right? Is the customer's always right, but that's not necessarily true. And I think because of the emotion in our profession, that they get that much more ramped up. So if we can learn to handle that emotion and kind of bring it down, that's helpful too.
100%. And that is also within the practice, right? Conflict resolution is a difficult thing. And if you have infighting going on and you're not willing to address it and really speak on the teamwork atmosphere, is the same thing. And so you'll lose people because of the culture, but also showing them that you're supporting them, right? If there is something that happens, you've got to support your staff. You've got to, but if they're wrong, then address it. But, you know, putting your staff first and showing them that you're going to support them in the face of adversity is very important in that culture, and them realizing that you as a leader are there for them. So that's one thing that I've taken very strongly in showing that not only do I support the staff, but that I'm going to lead from the front, going to lead by example in all facets. So yeah, it's there's a lot of emotional part of the industry that I think that is some people are not prepared to deal with and have a difficult time with it, and maybe that drives some of it towards selling and, you know, selling to corporate because of the emotional part, the client communication part that I think is very taxing, especially these days. I don't know if it's post-COVID, but there's definitely a lot more people online that are abusive, but also within the hospitals too. And so preparing your staff for that and not being afraid to fire a client. Unfortunately, it comes to that sometimes, but you've got to protect your staff. They cannot be abused at all.
So what's a part of that other than, you know, you're training them to communicate, you're talking about, you know, I get rid of the toxic environment. I don't want a toxic environment. What's involved in that, do you think? Like if your practice is toxic presently, because I'm sure there's people listening that have that situation, what do you see is, number one, the primary issue? Is it the leaders, or is there something else that you can do if you're not the leader to help with that toxicity? Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's multifaceted. 100% that those, if you are a leader within an organization, you're a practice owner, you're medical director, whatever, you've got to be willing to address problems that are brought up, because there's nothing more frustrating for lower ranking employees than to feel a hypocrisy or an unwillingness to address and you've got a certain individual that, maybe that they've been there for 20 years and they are just disgruntled and they treat everybody like dirt, but the management won't do anything about it because that person has been there so long, and they know the only code to the back gate or whatever, something silly, right? And so
they're the only one that can run the blood machines or something.
Right,
like
exactly.
There's always
exactly.
like that excuse that we've got to keep that person because they're the only one that does X, Y, or Z.
100%. And I'm not saying, move right to firing, but you've got to be willing to, have that verbal communication. Then, okay, if this keeps going, then we go up to a written counseling, but also focusing on the positive, being willing to recognize staff. Every staff meeting, I'm quizzing my doctors. I'm asking my lead technicians, hey, who did awesome this month? Who stands out? Who was willing to come in and go that extra mile? Well, I want to recognize them. I'm going to do a certificate. I've got a coin that I'm going to give them, something in front of everyone and recognizing them. There's a very basic leadership 101, right? You praise in public and you discipline in private, right? So taking the time to recognize those employees that are standing out, whether it's a tech, a doctor, or a client service representative, somebody from the admin, is very important. I do team building exercises. Like I said, I invested in bringing in coaches. But also, man, I bought, whitewater rafting trips for my staff to go to. And because we're a 24-hour hospital, you've got to be able to think outside the box. I can't just do one event because, some of that staff
not everyone can go, right?
Right, exactly.
Close the place down.
Yep. And so, having a company where you tell them, hey, these are all my employees. They've got, example, I did a snow machining ATV excursion where my staff over the course of a week could plan with their family or other colleagues to go and go out on a snowmobiling tour. Same thing with fishing, a lot. So bottom line, be creative, think outside the box, think of things that your staff would enjoy doing, because that's going to create that culture, that's going to build that team camaraderie, and that's going to be brought back to your hospital.
Yeah. So what advice, well, you're kind of talking about positive reinforcement. So if someone is in a situation, let's say that they're starting to feel burned out by vet med, because it sounds like you're pretty passionate about this career that you've developed. If they're really starting to get burned out and frustrated and overwhelmed by actual practice, what kind of advice do you give them? Because I'm sure you have this with some of your employees sometimes, where they're starting
for sure.
to feel overwhelmed.
Yeah, there's only so much you can do, right? And so I think that you see it a lot more in the emergency medicine side of the house, because one, the veterinary medicine is getting expensive, right? And money is emotional. And so you compound that with somebody coming in where they, God forbid, you see a lot with people that they tie their dog up to the back of the bumper when they go camping or something silly like that, and they forget and they drive off, right? Yeah. So a horrible situation. But they come in, emotion is high. And now all of a sudden you give them an estimate for surgery, hospitalization, $5,000 to $8,000, whatever. And now the emotion is even ramped up even more. And you get this, well, you don't care about, because you only care about money, that type of thing.
Right. You only care about money. That's the line.
Right? Yeah. And there's nothing more frustrating as a medical professional when medicine is expensive, and if that individual didn't get pet insurance, unfortunately, the burden of that falls on that individual. And very rarely do you have people that are, just have an extra 5,000 laying around ready for emergency treatment. And so the people that are getting, I think, burnt out many times are the ones that are having a hard time dealing with the emotional side of the house when it comes to clients that are amped up with money and the emotion of that, having that conversation. So I try to look for ways to solve problems when I, for a while I was having a lot of doctors complaining about how many messages they were getting and dealing with all of these callbacks that took up so much time out of their day. And so I tried to think outside the box, and I have a licensed veterinary technician who has a lot of career experience, and her job right now is just dealing with client callbacks to take away that time from the doctor. We look at the human side. these medical doctors, they have physician assistants. They have all of these things set up where they don't even deal with talking about money.
Right.
They're talking about the medicine. And so I think that that's really important, to try to have the doctors not focused on so much on that, getting those estimates and then having other individuals discuss that with the owners, having people involved in your hospital that can deal more with the client interaction. I think helps to remove some of that burnout that we see with doctors, because the emotional level, especially on the emergency side, really takes a toll. On the general practice side, I don't see that as much, with the shots and snots type thing. And on the specialty side of the house, at my hospital, I've got a boarded ophthalmologist, had a resident trained surgeon for a while, so looking for a boarded surgeon for sure. But we've got a boarded oncologist and got a whole internal medicine side of the house. And we don't see it as much on that side, right? Because the clients that are coming to them, that are being referred to them, but many times they're committed to the treatment.
They've
plan.
already had the money discussion.
Right, exactly.
They know it's going to be expensive. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, my hospital right now, we've got 25,000 square feet, two stories, 22 exam rooms, 5 surgery suites, and over 70 employees. The biggest side that I see being hit the most is the emergency side. That is where the emotion is high. That is where the money is always a concern. And so having your staff prepared to have those discussions, I think, is really important with your staff meetings, and going over scenarios, being prepared and trying to prepare your staff to deal with that, I think helps on that burnout side.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about your Army experience, because that's a big part of your life, and it still is, I imagine, huh? Tell me what kind of lessons you learned. Like how did that prepare you to run a giant hospital like you have now?
Well, I think, the biggest thing that I learned was facing adversity, going through the different things in the military was, again, there was a lot of tests that were done. There was a performance-based institution. And so you're constantly dealing with these goals that you're setting and achieving to be moving upwards, but you're also having these hurdles and these obstacles in front of you, whether they're created in training or whether it's real world, and realizing that you have to address it and you have to keep going and overcome those obstacles. And so you're going to have challenging things occur to you that are not expected. You're going to have that really valuable employee that goes through something messy outside of work, whether it's a divorce, whether it's a family member that is sick, and now they're leaving. That's nothing that you could do, but that is a hurdle that you have to be prepared mentally to address and be ready to adapt to that. And so the skills, I think, just being resilient to change, being resilient to adversity, not being afraid to address issues and conflict resolution is really important, and especially with the military. You've got to have that team camaraderie. You've got to have that team atmosphere. And so constantly looking at, how do I build my team, and the individual, what type of skill set do they have, and where are their interests, and helping support that.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I think many veterinarians forget that they're dealing with individuals, and they need to figure out what drives that person, what do they like to do, what are they good at, and then go down that road. I think
100%.
Instead of
correct.
fighting against them and saying you have to be faster, you have to make, like trying to change them is much harder than trying to work with them and using their skills.
Exactly. But you're exactly right. And then also, are you offering those opportunities within the hospital? So that was a big thing that I wanted to do, is to constantly offer new services. What is the best service that I can offer, and giving that career opportunity for a technician to learn that skill set and use it. So I'm investing in advanced imaging. I have a CT machine, right? But I need my technicians to be able to drive that. And so
somebody's got to learn how to run it, huh?
Right, exactly. So now I've opened up new opportunities. You're exactly right. And so, and talking to, having those sit downs, you don't just have the sit downs with the individuals when there's something wrong. You know, make sure that you're doing counselings and talking with people, finding out what is their career goals, what is your 1 year career plan, what is your 5-year career plan, and trying to help achieve that. I found out a lot about my technicians and their goals, and then trying to help achieve that. So investing
They're more
in CE,
likely to stay, right?
I believe so, 100%. You know, I even offer continuing education funds to my licensed vet techs. So not just to my doctors, obviously
Right.
they need that, but I offer that to my licensed vet techs too. So showing them that I want to invest in their career. If they want to pursue something, then how can I implement that and offer that in my hospital also?
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about this, the Ranger Canine Athletic Program. That was something that you developed. I read that in your bio, and I thought that sounds interesting. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So, yeah, I appreciate that. That was, so I was the first person to actually develop a conditioning program for military working dogs. That was one of the things that I was shocked. You know, there's such a huge emphasis on the individual soldier or Marine or airman on physical fitness, right? They've got this physical fitness test, they've got training programs, but there was nothing for military working dogs. And what I found a lot,
That's
yeah,
fascinating that they didn't think of that, huh?
exactly. Well, you know, I think they're spoiled. Well, really, military law enforcement are spoiled, right? Because there's been centuries of breeding and selection that has gone into. I mean, when we look at the athlete, it doesn't matter if it's a human, a horse, or a dog. The 3 pillars of that are going to be genetics, conditioning program, and the nutrition, right? That is the 3 pillars of it. And so the genetics are taken care of. We've got these phenomenal athletes, you know, just take a Belgian Malinois, for example.
Oh, I love those dogs. I'm a
I mean,
Belgian fan. I had Belgian Taverns.
yeah, they're absolutely
them.
fascinating athletes, right? But
Mhm.
they get spoiled because they're so naturally gifted, right? And so and nutrition is really, there's billions of dollars of research put into the current market of you know, dog food. If we were to have this conversation 20 years ago, we'd probably be talking about 2 different brands, maybe, that were of
Right.
quality. Now there's a lot of research put into it, and so that's taken out of it. And so we're looking at these 3 pillars. The athlete, the big thing is the conditioning program. What are you doing to make sure that your dog is in shape? And what I was seeing is a lot of military and law enforcement had the same mentality with a dog as they did with, for example, their rifle, right? They go down to the range, they zero it, and they know if they put it in the arms room, it's going to shoot the exact same way as it did 3 months ago. It hasn't been touched. And so same mentality was with the dogs. They were looking at it that way. Well, I went through my certification program. My dog was in shape. Now I just got to keep it fed and keep it happy in the kennel. But no, your dog.
Now he's panting when I make him run.
Right, exactly. And so what's he doing when he's panting? He's not smelling, right? And so they're not moving that air through their nose to be able to smell. So if we're asking them to detect and to find something, and that they're sitting there panting, thermoregulating because they're out of shape, well, then they're not using that nose to sniff and to try to find stuff. So making a conditioning program was something that I realized took the guesswork out of it. Because when I would ask these handlers, well, what did you do today? Well, you know, I went on a run, because that dog is going to do what they are doing. And many times they, you know, would go to the gym and work out and lift. And so the dog doesn't get anything to do.
Right.
And the dog sits there, and now that the dog is spinning in the kennel and is exhausted because it's been jumping around and it wasn't sleeping. And so now they pull it out to work, and not only is it out of shape, but it's tired. And so I found that conditioning program where you're giving the workouts, you've already created it, takes the guesswork out of it, and the handlers were willing to spend time conditioning their dogs. And so bottom line, I built a progressive conditioning program, starting off at baseline fitness, and how do we keep moving that goalpost, right? Because the conditioning the body, we have to stress it, right? You have to stress it just enough where we get the body to change and adapt to those stressors, which is getting in shape. But you got to keep moving that, because if we don't keep moving that goalpost and realizing that if we overstress it, we get an injury. But if we don't stress it enough, we don't get the change, right? So you've got that window of opportunity. We got to keep moving that goalpost. And so realizing that there was only a certain amount of time in the day. And so how do I get these handlers to buy into conditioning their dogs when they've got so much else to do besides keeping their own body in shape? And so that's what I looked to do. I looked to try to create a program which was very successful, and it was the Ranger Canine Athletic Program. I now turn it in. There's only the 2 apps that I have created are available on Google and iTunes. It is the ACAP, the Advanced Canine Athletic Program, and those are conditioning apps where every day the workout of the day, very similar to what we see CrossFit do, where they've got the WOD, the workout of the day. That workout of the day is actually texted to that dog handler or that owner. And so it takes the guesswork out of it, and all of the videos and education on what these different exercises do is in that app. So there's a lot of education to it. The bottom line, I saw a great need for these that were considered athletes, but they weren't being treated as an athlete.
It's the person that gets the Malinois and doesn't realize what they've got. It's like a time bomb, right? Like my 2 Verns were high energy, and I don't know that, just having them be a house dog wouldn't have worked. They're working dogs.
100% correct. Yeah. And that's a whole nother story, right? I mean, that's the civilian sector, when you see these dogs performing, you're like, wow, I want that, but you don't realize how much work goes into it, and you've got to provide that, right? Or they're going to be they're going to become destructive at home, or they're going to develop some type of a behavioral issue because they don't have a job. And so you've got to be able to provide that, even just by conditioning the dog. So that civilian side is a little bit different than law enforcement and military, because we've got dogs across the working dog hemisphere where it's not just detection, right? We've got, the TSA dog for sure, but there's endurance to that. I mean, they're 10, 12 hours a day. They're running, around and walking through an airport.
Right.
But that's much different than,
they have to stay engaged, and that's stressful, that mental engagement.
Exactly. But that's not the exact same job that, we see law enforcement, where they're doing bite work. They're doing and detection. So that's a little bit different of an athlete. So we define that athlete, right? I use the example of looking at the recent Olympics. Every gold medalist for different events would be fit for that event, but a sumo wrestler or a weightlifter is going to be much different definition of fit than a swimmer or a triathlete.
Right.
And so we got to define what fit is for that working dog, and then build a conditioning program that is going to help improve them to be able to do their job.
Yeah. So this particular conditioning program, could it be used for someone that, I mean, I used to do agility with my dogs and fly ball, and could it be adapted for that type of work?
100%. So I've actually done 2 different apps. There is the ACAP, the Advanced Canine Athletic Program, which is mainly geared towards your law enforcement military. But then I did the ACAP PET. And so through an extensive initial questionnaire, it puts you as the dog owner in to multiple different categories, so that your conditioning program is going to be much different than that of, if this was a geriatric dog that has had multiple surgeries. Well, to keep them in shape, we're going to do much different than if this was a young 2-year-old, Belgian Malinois that's very healthy, right? So we've got to define that and then have a conditioning program specific for that. So there's 2 different apps, the ACAP PET and the ACAP.
That's great. That's fascinating. I'm going to have to check that out. That's really cool. So tell me, changing subjects, tell me a little bit about why Alaska? Why is your hospital? I mean, it sounds like you were raised there, right?
Yep, I sure was. Yeah. So it was home, and I wanted to come back to it, after the military and my wife and family that we were raising. After discussion with her, wanted to provide some opportunity that I grew up with and really enjoyed, which was the outdoor experience. And Alaska is very unique in that, we don't have any professional teams, and the university sports are actually, or the high school sports scene is really, really popular up here. And so there's a lot of opportunities for these young kids to have in different club activities, in different sports. There's a lot of outdoor activities that are very popular up here, fishing, hunting, hiking. It's a beautiful, beautiful state, and there's a lot of opportunity not only for activities within the school district and the clubs, but also to be able to get out into nature and see that. And Alaska is one of those rare places where you can drive for an hour in any direction, get out and hike for 15 minutes and be somewhere where nobody else has been, and to not hear human activity and not have cell phone reception. And that's very rare. And so if you enjoy it, you want to experience that, you can do that in Alaska, and get the best of both worlds. And so I chose Alaska because the wife and I wanted to have our family be able to experience that, but also there's a huge, huge demand with Alaska. Unlike other states, you don't have the luxury of just being able to drive to another big metropolitan area and possibly access a specialty service that you didn't have in your area. And so we didn't have a lot of options up here. General practice was dime a dozen, but that emergency or specialty services,
care,
100%. Yeah, it was not a big thing up here. And so I saw an opportunity where taking that kind of the blueprint, what we see in the veterinary teaching hospitals, veterinary school, where it's kind of an all-in-one. And that was my goal, to create a practice that was all in one, where we had the general practice, but we also had that emergency, that 24-hour hospitalization, and the specialty referral side of the house. And so that's what I started working towards. And now here we are with 70 employees 4 years later.
That's impressive. In 4 years, it got big, huh? Did you start it out as 24 hours, or did you start? How did you start with that whole, 24 hours and the specialist? Did it all start the same, or did you kind of work your way up?
Definitely had to work towards it. Yeah, that was a constant work in progress, and had to constantly invest in recruiting. And that's a difficult thing, right? A lot of people that I get on the phone with and in their lower 48 and trying to recruit, starting off
like,
at that.
I want to live in Alaska. What?
Right. Exactly. Right. Do you guys have stores up there? So, explaining to them that, it's a beautiful, modern, just like any other state, but they've got unique opportunities that you may not have elsewhere. And that's a constant hurdle that I face. But once I invest in bringing people up and showing them the practice, and the state speaks for itself once they're able to see it. So
are most of your employees from other states and not from Alaska?
Not most of them. I would say about 25%. I've had to recruit quite a few, both techs and doctors from outside the state. Alaska, we don't have a veterinary school. We don't have a veterinary technician, program. And so a lot of in-house, I've invested heavily in in-house training and developed an in-house training program where I get technicians, have no experience, start off as a tech assistant. And through the training program, they're taking their VT&E in 18 to 24 months and becoming a licensed vet tech. So
you have your own little veterinary technician school going, huh?
Pretty much, yep. We've created a lot of training opportunities, and we have a couple of dedicated technicians that run up the training program and are running classes, and supporting that, supporting that training atmosphere is really important.
Yeah.
So Alaska was home. It was a tough sell for the wife. She was from the East Coast, and but she became very excited about it. Is a hockey mom now, and our kids into hockey and wrestling and gymnastics, all that stuff. And so, it's a great place to raise a family, and a great place. Our hospital, if you want to practice gold standard medicine and have a community that really is looking for that service.
Yeah, and a supportive team, right?
100%.
Which is what it's all about. So tomorrow I'm giving a lesson to some young veterinarians that I mentor on time management. So I thought I'd take this opportunity to ask you, do you have any secrets or thoughts about how to manage your time, how you can have the family and the hospital and the business and all of that? Like, how do you manage it?
It's difficult. It really is. But you've got to find where the problems are and try to create a solution for it. So just an example, my doctors were getting frustrated at how many callbacks they had to do. Like I said, so I hired a technician. She was retired, a stay-at-home mom, but I knew she was a licensed vet tech and said, "Hey, do you want to be able to work from home?"
Oh, so she does it from home. I don't think you told me that part. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's a
So
great
she's
idea.
able to do it from home. So that was one example, and I know I hit on that before, but that was one that was huge for the doctors, because now I've got that PA type individual that is that buffer in between the client and the doctor, frees them up from answering, silly, needing a prescription on a refill for diet, a certain prescription.
Right. Or what should I feed my dog? Or
exactly
questions that you don't have time for.
Yep. And then also, looking at ways, but you've got to keep a pulse on it and find out what is dragging down your team, and trying to address it, or at least show them that you're trying to address it is important. So again, facing those obstacles, not being afraid to address problems and look for solutions, and I'm very big at surrounding myself with people that are smarter than me, right? So
that is leadership lesson number one, right? I think that's genius. If you can get smart people around you, that's a sign of a good leader.
Exactly. But it takes a little bit of humbleness to be able to admit, hey, what am I not good at? I can't do everything, right? And what am I not good at? What do I not enjoy? Well, let me find somebody that is really good at that and have them part of my team. And that's, a little bit on the admin side, but also it has to do with leadership on the floor, and putting those people in those positions that are willing to make that difference, or are excited about your team and excited about the culture, to keep that attitude and keep it's constantly in motion, right? And so it's like a garden. If you're not willing to get in there and weed it out, it's going to get overrun. So, but yeah, time management is difficult. Across the board, trying to find that balance with life, with family, but you've got to constantly work at it. And when I talk to my doctors, I think that the biggest thing that they feel throughout the day is the support. So making sure that your doctors have the support staff is really, really hard. But that comes back to the retention. What are you doing to keep those technicians? Are you investing in them? Because that then falls onto the stress level of the doctors, or them being able to be productive and do the medicine that they want, if they don't have the support staff to be able to help achieve that.
Yeah. I find that when I talk to strong leaders and people that are very, very busy, that they have a morning routine or some sort of routine, something that they do to try to keep focused and grounded and keep their time and their brain under control. Do you have something like that you do?
So I would say more in as far as the practice goes. I don't have something big on the outside of work. I would say that my passion right now is really with the family, and doing stuff with the family, seeing my children perform in their athletics at this time of life.
So that's a priority. Like you leave work so you can go do that. Yeah.
Exactly. That is something that I really enjoy right now. So I don't have a specific routine where I go to the gym at this time every time of the day, because I don't have that luxury of a set schedule. So fine, but you do have to find time and take advantage of the opportunities that you do have, and reinvest in yourself when you do have that opportunity. So, as a business owner of a hospital of this size that is 24 hours, I don't have the luxury of having a specific routine right now. But I find the passion in leading the team, investing in the team, and constantly making this the best place that I possibly can for the community, but also for the staff and the type of medicine that we want to offer.
So. Yeah. And I think just the acknowledgement that that's okay, that this is where your life is right now. Because I feel a lot of times our veterinarians that I work with and talk to, and even in my own practice, we struggle to think that it's supposed to be a certain way. And we feel like we're just keeping our heads above water because our kids have this and that, and we're running and, trying to keep it all together. And just the knowledge that that's a part of your life. It's not your whole life. And it's okay to be in that time in life when, there's 3 soccer games over here and there's a band concert and and you're just running around sometimes trying to keep it all afloat. That's not wrong. It's not something that you need to fight against. It's more of just opening yourself up to all those possibilities.
Exactly. Yeah. And, I'm seeing more and more that people are trying to find, I guess, satisfaction in their work, and they're getting frustrated, so that they're doing the relief work stuff. They're doing the locum thing. And I find that they have the exact same difficulties as somebody that just has that they've signed a contract and they're working out of one hospital.
Yeah.
And so there's no real easy solution to it, but you're 100% correct. It's realizing that the certain lifestyle that you have right now is not going to be the same in 4 years from now. It's not going to be the same in 8 years from now. And it's okay to be really busy. It's because it may not be that way. And, as your kids grow.
Yeah. My kids
leave.
are grown, so I have a lot more time than I used to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're right. It's recognizing that it's okay, and there's a reason for it. I mean, what better opportunity and time do you have to work really hard and save, for that future that you want, to build that future that you want when you're healthy and you're ready to do it. So it's okay to be busy. It's okay to be a little stressed.
Well, and if you have a passion for what you're doing, like you do, obviously, then it isn't as difficult. So finding that passion spot in your life, passion for your family, passion for your practice. Right now you're very passionate about building this practice and getting it larger and serving the public in your area. And that makes it less like work.
Sure. And you're exactly right. And then finding people that have that exact same type of belief is also key. And then when you do find those people, making sure that you keep them as a priority and you invest in them, I think is important. So that's been part of the reality of the success. Is I've had phenomenal staff, and I have phenomenal team members that are passionate about their jobs also and their careers. And it makes the whole team realize that we're all in this together, and left and right of you've got people that want to be there, want to be the subject matter expert, and they have a leadership that is reinvesting in them and helping them achieve their goals of their career and their education.
Yeah. So I noticed, and this is another switch in the subject, if that's okay.
Yeah, of
but
course.
I noticed on your website that you're offering virtual appointments. And I've talked to a lot of other veterinarians, on the podcast and off the podcast about that, because I think it's kind of the up and coming thing. It's the new thing in vet med since COVID and before. So is this something that's new since COVID? Is this something that you've been thinking about? How is it working? Like, can you just tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So when that became an option, 100% COVID was the driver of exploring that. And that because they passed some legislation where it made it available to get your telemedicine license. And so that was something that I applied to do. And I thought it'd be a big opportunity because we do have a lot of clients that are very remote, and getting in to see a veterinarian can be very difficult. And so I thought that would be a huge thing. It is not as popular as I thought it would be. And so I never closed the doors. Even during COVID, I never had any mandates in place. I never went to curbside only. I stayed open. And my belief was that, it was people wanted to mask up. That's fine. That's your body, your health, your choice. I did not mandate that. And for my staff or for clients, I kept the doors open. And shockingly, I was expecting during COVID, with all the lockdowns and the talk, that I was going to have a 25 to 30% decrease in revenue. But approaching it from, hey, we're not just doing curbside. We're not closing the doors. I'm not putting out a bunch of mandates. I had a 35% increase in my clients coming to me because
Yeah,
they were frustrated with the corporate environment where they wouldn't even talk to you. You know, that you had to, that you couldn't even come into the building. And so the wait times were exhausting for people sitting out in the parking lot. And so I kept the doors open and continued to serve the public, and they recognize that, I think.
Yeah. Well, you're lucky that you were able to do that, because not everybody was. In our state, it was mandated that hospitals had to, shut down and do curbside and not do routine things like right at the beginning. And then it kind of eased up a little bit. But so the telemedicine is still a thing. What do you think about it? Like, what do you think about the future of vet med? Is it something that's going to be a thing? Because I've been talking to a few corporations that are starting to actually just be that. Like there's businesses opening up that are just doing veterinary telemedicine, and I wonder how that's going to affect our profession.
What I end up seeing a lot of times with the telemedicine stuff is there's only so much you can do, and if they're saying, well,
tied.
My dog has been vomiting and has diarrhea for the last 4 days. Okay, well, that's not something that I can do.
Right?
100%. We got to rule out the differentials here, and here's the worst case scenario. And so that's not something that I can just do over the phone or through a visual Zoom call. So I see a lot of times it just comes down to, hey, you got to go in for diagnostics anyways. And so I don't know how much it's going to have an impact. I don't see a lot of people steering towards that, even with as spread out as people are in Alaska. They are still wanting to come in and have that contact and see that doctor face to face.
Yeah.
So
there's something about that relationship, I think, for the clients and for us that makes it, I don't know, not very amenable to telemedicine. Even when I did it during COVID, it was difficult. People don't know what to show you. You can't touch the patient. Like there's a lot of things that just don't work.
Exactly. And I think that's where as veterinarians, we do a lot of detective work in ruling out these differentials, but we've got to see that patient, because we can't just talk to them, right? We can't get a full description of where it hurts. We got to, we're doing 90% of our physical exam, just observing that patient and how they're behaving and how that posture is and how the dog is standing or behave, so
yeah, sometimes as you're talking to the client, if you're just watching the dog, you can figure a lot out without even touching it, right?
Exactly. And that's very difficult to do. Everybody has that family member that takes a picture of this skin rash and sends it to you and asks you what it is. It's like, well, it could be a number of things. So I need to see it. I need to be able to get a slide and do a stain or something, but there's only so much you can do from a picture in a Zoom call. And I think it's especially magnified for veterinarians, because we've got to see that patient and see how they're acting, because that's how they're going to communicate with us and telling us what's wrong, and drive that which diagnostics are we going to perform.
Yeah. Well, I just noticed that, and I was wondering what you thought about it, because I've been talking and thinking a lot about it, and even did some of it during COVID. And, I kind of have my own thoughts on how it went, but it's just a topic I think that we're going to hear a lot about. And it's interesting to see that even in Alaska, it's not super popular. For you.
Yeah, no, shockingly. And I really thought it was going to be something that was going to take off, but unfortunately it just constantly drives me in the conversation with the couple of dozen times that I've done telemedicine where, hey, I still need to see that patient. Unfortunately, there's only so much you can do through a call.
Yeah. So what am I not asking you? Like what else do you want to share that I haven't asked you, or that I don't know enough to ask you about?
Oh, I don't know. I think, there's a lot of, I see some students right now coming out that are, in veterinary school or came out of veterinary school during COVID. And there's, I've got a couple of new graduates, and they felt very behind the power curve as far as their skill set graduating, because they were impacted so much with this basically remote learning, because of what was going on. And so realizing that there may be a little bit of a learning curve for new graduates is something that I've experienced recently. Unlike myself, I felt very prepared leaving veterinary school, ready to tackle a plethora of things. And the young doctors or soon-to-be doctors that I'm interviewing now don't feel that same way. I'm not sensing that. And so being ready to mentor and coach new hires is something that, as a practice owner, is a new hurdle that I am now facing. And so I'm sure that there's other people out there seeing that, but that has been something new that I think that there's people that are graduating veterinary school that has changed a little bit, were impacted negatively by that.
Yeah. And I think on some level, different than when I graduated, maybe not so different than when you graduated, but there's just so much information. Like there's so much that you have to try to learn. And I think that's overwhelming at times. They think they've got to remember it all and know it all. And I think just trying to realize that that's an issue and that there's people out there that can help. I'm constantly telling the new veterinarians that work with me, call the specialist, call the internist, call IDEX, ask them. That's what they're there for. That's what we need to do, because you can't know everything.
100%. Exactly. And that's been also, I think, part of the success that I've had here at this hospital is having those specialists in-house here has significantly improved the confidence of the general practitioners, because they can reach out with a question right away. They can refer in-house. Having these emergency doctors that have 10 years of experience on the same shift in the floor as the young doctors that are doing the general practice side of the house, they can reach out to their colleague and ask a question. And so that's been, you are exactly right. Unfortunately, I've been able to have that in-house, but people that don't have those specialists in-house or don't have the luxury of having multiple doctors working with you and you're by yourself, you've got to use your resources. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to get on a community forum and ask that question, or call up a specialist, or write IDEX using these resources that are available.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think that they're supposed to know it all, and then it's embarrassing to call. But even in this conversation, you talked about, well, I really thought this telemedicine was going to go over, and it didn't. Like there's things that happen that you don't expect. And so you've got to be okay with that. Like that's part of the deal, the failures and the learning curve and asking questions and maybe being wrong at times. I've called the specialist and they'll say, oh, it's absolutely this. And I'll be like, really? I never thought of that. Okay. And then I go and treat it like they want me to treat it. And sometimes they're right 100%. And then sometimes that doesn't work out either. So I just think the knowledge that we're all learning, no matter how long we've been doing it and growing, is important.
Exactly. And I think also not being afraid to have that conversation with the client, right?
Saying, I don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And telling them, hey, this is what I think it is, but I don't know. I'm going to do some research. I'm going to reach out. So being able to admit that to the client, have that conversation with the client of the unknowns that are there and the need to pursue X, Y, and Z to get those answers, and explaining that to them.
Yeah, I think that's something that I see a lot in the veterinarians that I coach. They're afraid to say, I don't know. So I don't know what there is in vet school that makes us fearful and makes us think that we need to know. It's kind of scary to me, because I think a lot of that inability to say, I don't know, creates the communication issues that we have with the clients. Because if the client knows that this is what I think it is, but it could be, 6 or 8 other things, and this is what we're going to do to find out, that's going to be a lot better than saying, this is absolutely what's going to work, and then it doesn't work. And then they're, disillusioned and upset that they spent money. And, it's the communication part of the, I don't know.
Yep, exactly. And that even goes down to a simple thing like a time frame estimate, right? Committee, if you tell a client, well, this will be done in 30 minutes, they're watching that clock. And so you got
Yeah.
to be really
Like how
careful
long does a
about
spay take?
exactly, right? And so not also being able to have that conversation that there's variables that are out of your control, but we're working to solve it. And this is what I'm doing to try to figure it out, or this is what I'm doing to try to treat it. And this is what I don't know and need to find out. That's okay to have that conversation with the client.
Yeah. And don't feel like an imposter when you have to say, I don't know.
Sure.
Like that's
Yep.
part of the deal, right? Yeah. Well, this has been super pleasant. I feel like there's so many other things I could ask you because I think that your whole career path has been really fascinating. Is there any like life motto or book that you think somebody should read, or any like big words of wisdom that you want to share before we kind of
Oh,
wrap it up? And I can certainly have you back on if there's a lot more we can talk about.
oh, I'd be happy to come back on anytime. I don't think I have a one thing, there isn't one specific key thing. There's a lot of things that play into it. But I do think that it's important to not be afraid to fail, right? I see a lot of my colleagues that were so afraid of failing that they, only lease this small little area in a strip mall or whatever. And now all of a sudden they're freaking out because they're successful and they can't expand. How do
Right. Their
I
parking
grow?
lot's too small or whatever.
Exactly. Yep. Right. And so don't be afraid to, if you're going to fail small, then why not fail big, And so not being afraid to have that field of dreams that, if I build it, they will come type thing, because many times they do, and you're going to be successful if you put your mind to it and aren't afraid to tackle that. And so that was one of the things that I did right away went big and kept being able to invest and grow the business. So reaching for the stars and, maybe falling on the moon type thing, not being afraid to go far and try to achieve that.
Yeah. And that's with everything in life, right? The
Sure.
only way you're going to get somewhere is by taking a little bit of a risk.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, this has been super pleasant. Can you tell people if they want to learn more about you or your hospital, how to get a hold of you, or your website address, or whatever you want to share?
Yeah, I think the website is the easiest. We've got a good social media team and, but tier1vet.com is our website. And, a lot of information there, the ability to apply. Would love to
get some more people in Alaska.
Exactly.
All you people out there that are working in a toxic hospital and you want to move to Alaska,
yep, and
contact Sean, right?
it's ready to go. It's ready to go. Like
awesome.
I said, we've got 5 surgery suites.
It sounds interesting. And I would love to come see your practice. So when I go to Alaska, I'm going to specifically try to come see your practice.
Good. You are invited for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, this has been great. I've had a really good time. If anybody out there wants to learn more or has any questions, go ahead and email me. And if you want to see Sean back on the podcast, if he's willing, I will get a hold of him again and get him back on here and talk about anything. Like the military thing is fascinating to me. I have a couple of other vets that were on here talking about military, and it was really, for those of us that don't know anything about military, it's fascinating. So I appreciate your service, and I thank you for that. For the people and the dogs that are in the military. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on here, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. So have a beautiful week, everyone, and think big and do big things like Dr. Sean McPeck has done in Alaska. And I really appreciate you being here, and have a great day. Thanks so much. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, Sean. Oh.